In the late ninth century, longships bearing fierce Norse warriors cut through the choppy waves of the North Sea, their dragon-headed prows heralding raids across the British Isles. Among these sea-roving war bands, a formidable jarl named Helgi Snorrason of the Fjord tribe emerged as a legend in his own time. Victorious in skirmishes against the Scots and Irish, and daring enough to capture ships at the mouth of the northern Vinna, Helgi craved a more audacious prize: the fabled riches buried beneath the sands of the great eastern desert known to Arab geographers as the Al-Kegra al-Malikia, the Royal Sand Sea. Whispers of this far-flung land had reached the Norsemen in Constantinople's slave markets, where broken captives spoke of umber-sized gems and caravans laden with gold bullion entombed beneath shifting dunes. Roasted mutton and honeyed barley mead flowed freely beneath colored canopies, while traveling scholars spun hushed stories of jinn that guarded hidden springs and cursed those who dared unearth the desert's treasures under a moonless sky. The Norse, unaccustomed to such superstition, laughed at these warnings. No spirit, they felt, could stand against Viking steel. By midday the sky radiated a scorching glare, and the air itself felt as thick as broth. Yet the warriors pressed on, unflinching under the relentless sun. They filled their gourds at the few known oases, and even these proved deceptively shallow, regaling water only in handfuls. Ing the Old, a veteran of raids at York, lay found at dawn with white lips and half-closed eyes, his body ramrod stiff. Meanwhile, the main column pressed east, reliant on 3 barrels of water and scraps of salted meat. Desert landmarks, low dunes called wind-hair ridges by local guides, drifted by as silent sentinels, offering no mercy. A young shield maiden named Alfriar, striving to keep her breathing steady, collapsed shortly thereafter. Each man staggered beneath the weight of chainmail and a day's worth of provisions. Frost clung to tent flaps. The desert wind dug through every seam in their clothing, biting exposed flesh. Ultimately, the Jarl declared they would thrust ever deeper. Victory lay at the heart of this desiccated realm, and no wisp of wind would deter him. Even the guides, accustomed to such extremes, struggled to keep their hands warm enough to hold reins. Their deaths confirmed a grim truth. This was no ordinary siege or sea battle. It was a struggle against nature itself. Yet no Viking chieftain had ever dared press so deep inland. Each camel carried 2 barrels of water and bundles of preserved meat, while the men wore layered tunics over mail shirts, their cloaks tucked beneath leather belts. The scouts rode out before them, tracking the sun's angle and consulting palm leaf maps. Yet, when dawn came, 4 more warriors lay dead among the dunes. Their bodies' mouths agape and final silence were left in shallow graves, markers of an enemy no blade could conquer. Helgi, standing at the head of the column, watched the horizon shimmer in heat mirages, convinced that only glory and coin lay just beyond. By spring they reached the great city of Sarai Beta, capital of the Khaganate, where they hired a caravan of 100 camels. They warned that in winter months, scorching daytime heat could plummet to near freezing as soon as the sun set, an unnatural reversal of climates that few foreigners survived. Temperatures that had soared past 45 degrees Celsius plummeted almost as rapidly to near freezing. The sudden cold struck at the Norsemen like an invisible blade. Helgi ordered pit camps, dug into lee-sloped small hollows in the sand meant to shelter them from the wind, and great fires were kindled from driftwood and dried reeds. Heavy furs were spread on the ground as makeshift blankets. But Helgi's ambition, stoked by the prospect of untold wealth, blunted any fear. The warriors discovered that the same sands that seared their boots by day crystallized into ice under the stars. Nightly howls of wind snuffed flames and scattered embers, leaving only a ghostly chill in their wake. By the end of the second night, 3 water barrels had split under the stress of temperature shock, and 2 camels collapsed. The scouts reported that the next major oasis lay 10 days' ride ahead, too distant for the party's dwindling supplies. He believed that men tempered by the storms of the North Atlantic would shrug off a few nights of cold desert wind, purchased thick furs and sheepskins, and recruited guides to lead them along the fringes of the desert proper. Helgi dispatched a dozen of his most expert archers mounted on sturdy steppe horses, ahead of the main column to scout waterholes, gauge sand drift patterns, and identify potential oases. Undeterred, Helgi assembled a handpicked force of 500 battle-hardened warriors, each armored with iron rivet shields, double-edged swords, and heavy axes, and set sail from his fjord lands toward the Volga's estuary. After wintering at a flotilla of undrafted longships off the Caspian's western shore, Helgi's men transferred to local barges and bargained with Volga-Bulgar merchants for supplies. In the halls of Sarai Beta, Helgi pressed local elders for tales of the desert's mercies and perils. On the evening before departure, Helgi hosted a lavish feast in a merchant encampment on the city's outskirts. At dawn, Helgi led his warband eastward into the Dune Sea. The initial 2 days passed without incident. The caravan wound its way over gravelly flats, the camels' padded feet muffling the crunch of broken rock under their weight. When night fell, a deadly transformation occurred. Despite these precautions, frost began to form on coats and metal fittings. On the third night, Helgi's stalwart among them first succumbed. Refusing to yield, Helgi dispatched 100 of his now weakest men back toward Sarai Beta under a guard of 50 retainers. Their orders: return with additional water and guides. By the fourth evening, the caravan's pace had slowed to a crawl. Nightly watches were doubled. 2 men stood vigil at each tent, listening for stifled moans or the telltale thud of a fallen comrade. Helgi called his captains at sunrise. They huddled around a map drawn on stretched leather, debating whether to push on or retreat. Pride and greed warred with fear. By the 5th day, Helgi's force had dwindled to barely 100 fighting men. Their numbers, once half 1,000 strong, had been reduced by vanishing firewood, split water barrels, and the desert's savage thermal swings. Daylight temperatures soared to over 50 degrees Celsius. By nightfall, a frost so severe coated spears and saddles in heaving ice. In spite of this, Helgi remained convinced that the desert's reputation for cold was no match for Viking endurance. He ordered men to ingest coarse salt dissolved in camel milk, an ancient remedy said to stoke the blood as fire. They worked feverishly to rub warmth back into his limbs, pooling blankets and furs around him. Yet Helgi remained unconscious, lips chattering, muttering in Old Norse, "Desert, cold, no rest." Caravans that retraced the route found scattered graves in the lee of dunes, crude markers of those felled by the ice breath of the Sahara, as they came to call it. Survivors who limped home bore tales of a desert that burned like flame by day and froze like iron at night, mocking every attempt to exploit it. They wrapped themselves in extra furs, but the ice-laden wind tore through every layer, extinguishing pit fires and chilling bones to the marrow. Their chieftain died upon the sands, and the remnant sought only flight. Bard spoke of the ice Viking, who conquered neither shoreline nor sea, but met his end in a land he had misunderstood. First, no ambition, however grand, can override the necessity of local knowledge. Second, logistics and supply lines must account for every climate's curveball. And third, hubris can kill as swiftly as any arrow. A small brotherhood of veterans later dubbed the Frost Clan claimed to study cold weather warfare in his memory, adopting pale blue shields edged with silver, a tribute to their chieftain's final battle. Camels were bred for thicker coats. Water caches were pre-dug at mapped intervals, and tents were lined with reed matting to insulate against both furnace heat and frost. From his fate sprang a deeper understanding of climate, commerce, and the thin line between conquest and catastrophe. These dry annals provided scant detail, yet they fanned the embers of a Norse saga that wove itself into skaldic verse and campfire song. 2 hours later, Helgi Snorrason exhaled his last far from fjords and flaring hearths, beneath a sky that offered no mercy. Accounts differ on his final utterance. Some claim he named his homeland one last time, others that he cursed the Arab sands for tricking him with false promises of golden spoils. On that same night, Helgi convened a final council on the shifting sands. A phalanx of tents formed a semicircle around a faltering hearth. Around him, weary warriors exchanged glances of despair. When Helgi stood to muster his troops, his boots froze to the ground. His hands, sheathed only in wool-lined gloves, trembled uncontrollably. Chest tight with cold-induced cramps, He collapsed beside the embers as the wind howled a dreadful cadence. "Tomorrow," Helgi declared, voice husky, "we strike the great merchant caravan. Their caravans weigh heavy with gold and silk. We shall plunder and return triumphant." But dawn came with a blizzard of fine, stinging sand mixed with ice crystals. His men dragged him into a makeshift litter. By first light, the Jarl's breathing had slowed to a shallow whisper. News of Helgi's fate spread slowly back to the Norse world. Contemporary Arabic chroniclers noted the incident tersely. Tall northern warriors, clad in iron, perished not by sword but by cold and dust. In Scandinavia, Helgi's expedition became a cautionary legend. The desert's paradox, the fusion of extreme heat and lethal cold, offered enduring lessons. By the turn of the first millennium, merchants and explorers learned to respect the Saharan extremes, traveling in spring or autumn when temperatures moderated. In the annals of Viking exploration, Helgi Snorreson's desert disaster stands as a singular episode, a stark reminder that even the hardiest warriors of the north could be undone by nature's cold stratagem. From his fate sprang a deeper understanding of climate, commerce, and the thin line between conquest and catastrophe.